but actually sometimes it can just be about creating the feeling that you are the leader, that you are the best, and that you are different from the competition in a less tangible way. And we'll look at a couple of examples later on. But in terms of Nespresso, I think the way that they have limited access to the brand, while at the same time making it open to everyone, because anybody can go online and buy it, is a classic strategy of making it seem exclusive on one hand, but making it pretty accessible and easy to buy on the other one. And of course, George Clooney makes a great spokesperson for the brand as well. It's a perfect fit. So, but let's have a little look at Nespresso here in Spain. So back in 2009, it's well differentiated, perceived as expensive, but not very meaningful or well known. First of all, however, let me explain how we show some of the data from our Brand Z brand equity study. There are three key metrics that we look at in terms of how strong a brand is. We look at how meaningful it is to people, so that's whether it meets people's needs and whether it's seen as appealing or not. We look at how well differentiated it is, whether it's seen to be setting the trends or whether it's seen to be genuinely unique in its own right. And we look at how salient the brand is. And that may be a new word to you, but salient is literally how quickly the brand comes to mind when you think about a need for the product category. So how quickly does that brand come into your head compared to another one? And we tend to present that as this little circle that you see here. So in the center you will see the predicted market share for that brand based on the survey attributes. So Nescafé here in Spain, particularly in 2009, a strong brand, a market share in people's heads, if you like, of 24%. Meaningful, so 138 suggests it's indexing against 100, which is the category average, it's indexing high. Salient, comes to mind very quickly, but perhaps not quite as differentiated as its size suggests it could be. Store brand, so Mercadona or any of the other brands that you might buy from. Very meaningful. Store brands are always meaningful because they are cheap. Not very salient because each of the individual stores is only salient to the people that buys from it, and certainly not different because they all tend to mimic manufacturer brands. Nespresso, hugely different. Reasonably meaningful, little bit weak on salience. So if you looked at that brand, most people would go, well, the key thing we need to do is keep pushing on the salient. We need to make that brand more meaningful, we need to make it more salient. And then Dolce Gusto, also highly differentiated. So if I was Nestle, I'd be pretty happy looking at this chart because I've pretty much got 3 out of the 4 strongest brands in the marketplace. One of the things that we always see is if you want to command a price premium, you need to be differentiated. People have to have a reason for why they're paying more money for your brand. There's a number of other reasons why you want your brand to be well differentiated. You want it to be well differentiated because it makes it easier to choose. When people are faced with close alternatives, a choice between close alternatives, if they can see a difference, sometimes that's all they need to make the choice. And the example I sometimes use is I was in Japan and I wanted to buy a drink. And there's a vending machine. And I go up to the vending machine. There is no brand I recognize in that vending machine. And some of them I was not going to buy. So a brand called Pocari Sweat did not seem that appealing. Okay? However, there was one that was called CC Lemon. And I knew what lemon was. So I chose that one. So sometimes all you need is a trivial difference, but something that allows you to make that choice. But if you are asking a premium for your brand, but you're asking people to pay more for it than the competition, then you need it to be well differentiated. And we find that whatever country you go to. Last but not least, there is one interesting thing, is that a lot of the psychological studies that are being conducted today, understanding how the brain works, suggest that if we can say easily why we bought something, we'll be more satisfied with it. So actually, part of marketing a job is to provide an easy rationale for why we bought the brand in the first place, because we'll be more satisfied with it over the long term. Back to the pricing point. Price index. This is a perceived price, so Nescafe, a little bit above the average, store brand, significantly cheaper than the average, Nespresso, 41% more expensive than the norm for the category, Dolce Gusto, 23%. So what happened over the next 5 years? Nespresso's market share goes up dramatically. I think it peaked in our data at about 17%, and Euromonitor suggests a very similar number. More competition coming in, store brands beginning to take a larger share within the coffee category. So 5 years later, Nescafe has lost some share. Store brand has gained 12 points, which will come as little surprise to anybody in this room. But Nespresso, the most expensive brand out there, has also gained market share, as has Dolce Gusto. So offering something that is clearly differentiated, that you can make meaningful and salient to people, is the key to longer term success. In the short term, you still need to grow salience, but you need to start with something that is meaningfully different. Now, I used Spain because, one, I'm in Spain, and two, it's a good example of a brand that grew market share through being meaningfully different. So it's got. But if we went to the Netherlands, we'd see a whole different picture. Nespresso didn't grow. It held its market share through the recession. But part of the reason it didn't grow was because it had a very strong local competitor in Philips Senseo. So Philips, although it didn't grow, it actually declined a couple of points in the face of store brand competition. Essentially took some of the market share because the two brands are fighting for the same position in the marketplace. The other factor in the Netherlands is, I know that there are strong retailers here in Spain, but Albert Heijn in the Netherlands is immensely strong, is very good at marketing, and essentially launched its own version of Nespresso. So again, now we've got three brands fighting for the same position. And so you can never guarantee that what's successful in one country is going to be successful in another, simply because you may find that you're no longer well differentiated, you no longer are the meaningfully different brand, there are others that are already established, and you then need to find a way to push them out. Just one point about commanding a price premium, because I know that's something that is important. One of the things that we find in our data, and this is where we have benchmarked our survey data against actual purchasing behavior, is that if you want to predict whether someone will buy a brand, then the two things that are important are that they find the brand meaningful and that it comes quickly to mind, that it's salient. But if you want to predict whether they'll pay a price premium, then you find that difference and meaning are much more important. Salience is not important. So it's all about whether people can justify to themselves the reason for paying a price premium. This data is actually from New Zealand. It shows an integration where we did the survey. We also tracked people's purchasing behavior using one of the local panels there. It's an incredibly price competitive market. So one of the things we do is to understand whether purchasers are brand driven. That means they choose based on the brand first. They may have a repertoire of brands that they choose from, but but they believe the brands are worth choosing between, or are they price driven? They choose first on price and they'll take any brand. And what you can see is that brand driven people do end up paying more on average for their purchases within these categories that we looked at. But both brand driven and price driven people will pay more for a brand that they find to be meaningfully different.